mind-blowing proof that God created the universe.
Oh god, not this again. Don't worry though, this time it's going to be a bit more interesting. We have dramatic music and Ken Hovind.
Because the God of the Bible is not affected by time, space, or matter.
And the ironic thing is, this person's answer has more proof than they do.
Who created the universe?
Me.
I just kind of wanted to make things a little more interesting this time than God did it, so where I can in this video, I'm going to be using their own arguments against their own arguments. We've got a few other examples in here and a few different takes. But for now, we're going to start with someone who wants to talk about Genesis.
Very beginning, before anything else existed, there was just God. Then God decided to create the world.
That passage came straight from the Bible, right? It's Genesis. So, the word then suggests the passage of time. Beforehand, he didn't do anything, then he did something. The point may be irrelevant now, but we will use this later.
The Bible tells us this amazing story in the book of Genesis.
Yes, this fiction book, the wonderful, unproven story that it is. Sure, it is still wonderful, but I'm not a big fan.
On the first day, God said, "Let there be light," and light appeared, separating day from night. God saw that the light was good. On the second day, God created the sky. He separated the waters under the sky from the waters above the sky.
And this is where the flat earth arguments come from, because what is the waters above the sky? I'm sure there are waters. If we go past the sky, we can find it on other planets. I'm sure of it. I don't know of any planets that we've taken photographs of with water, but still, there is evidence to suggest there are water on other planets. Maybe not even just planets, there's evidence of liquid water on the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn. But that's not what's implied here. What is the waters above the sky? The Bible actually says it's separated by a firmament, which is where flat earthers claim that there's a dome over the earth, which is obviously a load of rubbish, because we've been past the sky. So the actual quote doesn't actually reference sky here. It just says, "And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so." Now the most logical interpretation of this, assuming they're right, which I don't believe they were right, obviously, but let's assume they are. The most common interpretation is that the waters above the firmament are the sky, because the sky is blue, like the ocean. But that's not how biblical literalists take it, so I'm curious. What are the waters above the firmament? I again would like to assume that it's the great expanse of the universe, but the universe isn't made up of water. So if anyone has an answer in a biblical literalist stance, please let me know.
On the third day, God gathered the water under the sky into one place, and dry land appeared. He called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters seas.
And this is proof the Bible shouldn't be taken literally, because he didn't. The Bible wasn't written in English originally, so therefore he couldn't have called the sea, sea, and land, land. I know I'm being picky here, but I am mostly just arguing against biblical literalists, rather than just simply people who believe in God.
Then God made plants, trees, and flowers to cover the land. Everything started to look colorful and beautiful. On the fourth day, God created the sun to shine during the day, the moon and stars to light up the night.
How was there light before the sun? Did he make the other stars first and then decide to make ours? I'm not sure. Maybe he waved his magic wand and said lumos. But why not have just made the sun first? Like, that's the most logical point, wouldn't it be? Like, just make a star for light? Or was he worried it would burn him? Because the sun is not actually that friendly to life. It's required, but it doesn't mean it's friendly.
He set them in the sky to mark days, seasons, and years. On the fifth...
Okay, I could deal with the plants having faces, but what the is this? And these things are meant to have faces, and for some reason it just looks wrong.
God filled the seas with fish and other water creatures. He also created birds to fly across the sky. God saw how wonderful they were, and told them to multiply and fill the seas and skies. On the sixth day, God made animals of all kinds.
Just out of curiosity, are birds and sea life not considered animals here? I mean, literally speaking, this is saying that God thinks animals are different to birds and sea life. They're separate somehow.
To live on the land. There were big animals and small animals, wild animals and gentle ones. Then God did something very special. He created people, a man and a woman.
Yes, because that's what we are, aren't we? We are very, very special. Sounds more like an ego boost to me, but what is it that we do that's so special? Is it the fact that we build, I don't know, cities and, farm things? But ants also do that? Is it just simply the fact that we are very, very intelligent? But then other creatures have also been shown to be very, very intelligent.
He made them look like himself.
So this part will be fun. Ken, can you just explain what did God look like?
Because the God of the Bible is not affected by time, space, or matter.
Oh yes, that's right. He had no spatial dimensions in which any features could be distinguishable from. So God doesn't look like us.
And gave them the whole world to take care of. He told them to look after the animals and the plants, and to have children so that people would fill the earth. Finally, on the seventh day, God had finished his work of creation, and he rested. He blessed this day, and made it holy, because it was the day when he rested from all his work of creating.
But I thought for an omnipotent being to create all of this, it would be effortless. I mean, he is omnipotent after all, and if it requires effort to make the universe, then eventually his omnipotence would stop working, because he'd be too tired to use his omnipotence, and would therefore not be omnipotent. Maybe only temporary omnipotence, so therefore he has a limit to his omnipotence? That might be confusing with me saying omnipotence too much, so let me try this one. If God is without time, and he was tired, when he rested, he would never have reached a point in time where he would no longer be tired, because he is timeless. Or if it works the other way, and he has an infinite time, he would not have needed to have rested, because resting would be instantaneous, and it would not have taken a day.
That's the story of how God created the world in 6 days, and then rested on the seventh. It's a story of how everything started, and how God made our world with so much care and beauty.
Don't forget the pain and misery and suffering, and don't think I'm thinking about man's free will here, as the common argument against that is. I mean the natural pain and suffering that people experience, like disease, or, falling over, or stubbing your toe. Simple things, or severe things, whichever, take your pick. But even if that was just because of the sins, then fine. God also gave us temptation and a legged snake that was apparently the devil, but maybe not have been. We're not really sure. Whether it be the devil or not, then God caused it to happen because he created it and he's all-knowing. So he knew that people would be tempted by it and would be fooled by the snake. Therefore, still, God created all the evils we have. The one who created the universe. The one who from nothing he created. He only says, kun feya kun. Al-Bari. Sorry, I know that was random, but apparently saying those words is what created the universe. I took a really big risk here and tried to say that magical spell that creates the universe. It failed. There is no universe hovering in front of me that I can perceive. Maybe I did create a universe and I'm unaware of it. As maybe God would be, as he's in a completely different separation of dimensions. Who knows?
God creates the universe, but the universe has a creator, and the creation is obviously a construct. So how we perceive reality isn't really how reality is.
That last statement I actually agree with. We don't perceive reality exactly how reality is in reality. Let's just see what he continues to say about it.
So let me kind of break this down in a simple format. The way I perceive you is only the way that my brain allows me to perceive you. Through my receptors, my eyes. But that doesn't mean that that's what you actually are. You're just a composition of what atoms and cells that are kind of meshed together and held together.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. So for example, when you look at things and you see bright flashy colours, those colours don't actually exist in reality. They exist in a different way. They're just light waves stretched out differently on the electromagnetic spectrum that we perceive to be specific colours. But it is just one electromagnetic spectrum. A light wave. It doesn't quite exist as the way we see it, it's just our brain's interpretation of the input through our eyes. But I still don't understand how that equals God.
But maybe that's not just all of reality. Maybe I close my eyes, right? And I'm speaking to the soul version of you, and the construct version of you couldn't actually be there.
No, reality doesn't suddenly change due to you closing your eyes. I mean, you have other senses that also pick up reality. Your eyes and seeing things are not the only judgment of reality here.
So this aspect of physical reality isn't actually real. It's just how we interact with it in the three-dimensional realm.
Even if other dimensions exist, a fourth dimension of spatial dimensions, obviously the fourth could be time, but a fourth spatial dimensions, another right angle to the current right angles we know. We can't currently see it or perceive it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist now, and if it does exist when we close our eyes, then it did exist already before we closed our eyes. We just couldn't perceive it. Nothing has changed by you perceiving less. You have reduced the input being allowed into your brain. That's all you've done. But we do have to question the idea of things like the stuff we can't perceive. Like the electromagnetic wave I was on about earlier, there are parts of it we can't see, like X-rays, which is why we have like four different types of telescopes in common, which is one judges X-rays, for example, and it tries to view things through X-ray vision, if you like, which we obviously don't see X-ray vision, but this telescope sees it and then displays it to us in a way our brains can see it, with a picture using colours. But like I said, just because we don't perceive the reality of other dimensions, if other dimensions exist, then we should still be able to move through those dimensions, if they exist. But we can't, and we don't, unless there's something else going on there. M-theory, or very similarly string theory, suggests that dimensions could be wrapped up on such a tiny scale that we lack the perception to see it. I don't know if that's true. Scientists don't yet know if that's true. But even if it were, and we were to explore them, none of this is proving God. You're just suggesting that we may not be able to perceive God in any way, ever. We already have the discussion that God may be timeless and spaceless, which is kind of saying he doesn't exist already. And this is just a really complicated way of saying the same thing.
Who created the universe?
God.
Who created the universe?
I believe in the Big Bang, so
Okay, cool.
I don't think it's like a person.
Well, he's closest to being right, but you don't need to believe in the Big Bang. It's science. I don't like the Big Bang. I wish it weren't true. I can't really deny it. I have tried looking into it to the best of my abilities. I am no scientist, but I do like looking into this stuff, and I can't find a reasonable alternative to the Big Bang at all in any way, shape or form.
Who created the universe?
I don't know, it was a big explosion, isn't it? Big Bang?
No, the Big Bang Theory actually states that it was the expansion of space, changing the universe from one state into another state. And just to be clear, it in no way implies that the universe came from nothing and then there was a real actual explosion of fire and created planets. That's not how it worked.
Who created the universe?
Me.
That's smart. I like that. Thank you.
Now, of course, I don't agree with this answer, but I like it. It's funny, and depending on your version of the idea of the universe, maybe there is some truth to it. Obviously, there's the idea of perception we was talking about earlier. Without the ability to perceive it, maybe it doesn't exist, which is kind of the point of whether something exists based on perception or not, is a potential argument. Does a falling tree make a sound if no one's there to perceive it? Does that sound actually exist? We say yes, because we think that cause and effect would still make it happen, whether it does or not, but we have no way of proving that. Just in the sense that we can not actually prove whether anything existed before we were born, because everyone in our existence could be NPC players. We've no way of proving that they're actually conscious. And this is where the idea of solipsism comes from. Or the Boltzmann brain argument. The Boltzmann brain is the idea that it's more likely for a brain to have spawned into existence rather than the universe. So therefore it's more likely for us to just simply be a brain existing in nothing than the universe itself. The only thing we can prove with full certainty to exist is ourselves. With that being said, did you create the universe by simply existing? These are just fun ideas not to be taken seriously because, well, they're unfalsifiable, just like God. As a concept anyway. However, biblical literalists, easily falsifiable. So let's continue.
Mind-blowing proof that God created the universe.
Wow, finally, what is this mind-blowing proof you have of God and that he created the universe?
So, let's break down the word universe. Uni means one, and then verse means spoken word or spoken statement.
Oh, okay, so one spoken statement. Awesome. We tried it before, it didn't work. Kun feya kun al-bari. Yeah, it still didn't work.
So see, let's read Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. And let's see what it says. Oddly enough, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That first verse in the Bible is your very first spoken statement. God spoke it into existence. He spoke the world into existence. That's what universe means. One spoken statement. There it is. That's proof.
Admittedly, this guy was only trying to prove who created the universe rather than how God created the universe, so he didn't actually have to give me the words God said. But I am going to point out he said universe, which for a start is English words. We could have chose to name it the grand expanse of noodles. It doesn't mean that if we look at a noodle recipe, we're going to find the creation of the universe. And even if we did, it doesn't make it true. Finding words in a book, which isn't even a quote of speech, and doesn't even say God spoke, is not finding that God spoke the universe into existence. Those are words on a page. It might be a verse or a statement if you like, but it is not spoken. Nothing was said. It was words on a page. That is not something spoken. If you had found some ancient holy cassette player with a cassette in it, maybe, maybe your point would be still valid in some regard, but not completely, because that cassette player, or the Bible, is not proof of God. It's a book with a talking snake and a talking donkey in it.
In addition, once you've told me where God comes from, please try to clarify how you can figure that a spiritual force can have an impact on a material universe to create it.
All right, your question, where did God come from, assumes that you're thinking of the wrong, obviously it displays that you're thinking of the wrong God.
Does Kent not realise that God is believed by other people and is also believed differently to him? Because the original question was just based on God, the concept of God. And I admit that Kent has the ability to defend his own version of God here, but to say the other person was wrong to ask it that way is not wrong at all. It is a perfectly valid question. Luckily, the next video doesn't avoid it like this, but we'll continue with this one. How does Kent avoid this question?
Because the God of the Bible is not affected by time, space, or matter.
Well, actually, let's just open up the Bible. Oh wait, I don't have to. We saw this earlier.
Very beginning, before anything else existed, there was just God. Then God decided to create the world. Then God...
So, according to your Bible, Kent, God does actually exist within at least time. And he made us in his image, which without spatial dimensions would be really hard to get an achievable look for something without spatial dimensions.
If he's affected by time, space, or matter, he's not God.
Then God decided to create the world.
There you have it. Kent, according to your own Bible, your biblical God is not God. That, or Kent, you're wrong. But I wonder if you ever see this video, whether you'll admit that you're wrong here, or whether the Bible's wrong, or you're just going to look at me and say that I'm misinterpreting you or the Bible.
Time, space, and matter is what we call a continuum. All of them have to come into existence at the same instant. Because if there were matter but no space, where would you put it? If there were matter and space but no time, when would you put it?
In a picture? A picture is a thing without time but yet still has things in it. A video would be a picture with time.
You cannot have time, space, or matter independently. They have to come into existence simultaneously.
Or they could simply have always been. Maybe somewhat different to what we experience in modern times, but there's no reason to assume the universe couldn't have existed for eternity in one way or another. Having everything squeezed down into the smallest of space like before the Big Bang, time most certainly would have worked differently.
The Bible answers that in 10 words. In the beginning, there's time. God created the heaven, there's space, and the earth.
Let me just open this book too. I see that you appreciate fiction, so I thought we'd have a quick look at this one. He secretly forged the One Ring in the fires of Mount Doom. That's a cool book too, but I don't believe that Gollum secretly desires a ring that makes hobbits invisible. And it most certainly doesn't mean that I'm wrong about that statement. I don't care that it's in your Bible that it says he created the universe. Also, I want to know how the universe was created, not who did it. So even if your God did do it, I don't care. How did he do it?
There's matter. So you have time, space, matter created a trinity of trinities there. Just, time is past, present, future. Space has length, width, height. Matter has solid, liquid, gas.
There's actually 4 fundamental states of matter. The one he missed was plasma. But there's also many, many others, including Bose-Einstein condensate.
You have a trinity of trinities created instantaneously, and the God who created them has to be outside of them. If he's limited by time, he's not God.
And he rested.
Sorry, I thought you'd prefer a different one by now. So if God was to rest, as we said before, that would mean he would need a starting point to rest and an ending point to rest, which means he intended to rest with the objective of later on, in time, being fully rested. And that rest took a day, which is 24 hours of time. So God has a temporal dimension at the very least.
The guy who created this computer is not in the computer. He's not running around in there changing the numbers on the screen, okay?
If all it takes to be a god was to create things, then aren't we all gods if we have children? Or if we sneeze and snot comes out, we created it, didn't we? So therefore we're gods. And if that was also the case, if all it takes is creation, why doesn't the Bible start with Genesis and end with Genesis? Creating everything we know to exist. And also that leads on to one of my favourite things to go to, which is, what if aliens created us? I mean, genuinely, they could have a god too, and their god could be made up, and there could be a real god, whatever god actually means in this sense, because aliens could have the capability of creating life and creating humans and creating even our solar system. Why not? It's potentially possible. Even if we can't do it now, we may be able to do that sort of thing in the far, far future, and the universe has been around for billions of years, so maybe aliens could have done that. Have that capability by now and have done it for us. I don't believe in that theory, but the possibility isn't zero. It's higher than God, but it isn't zero. And if it's not simply about creation, it's not just about creating us, then what about if aliens were more advanced? Maybe they could create universes. What separates God from an alien? Because God is an alien. He created the Earth and is therefore not from it. So if he's not from Earth, he is an alien. So what separates him from just an alien using science? Is it simply that he's magical? Is that what it is? That he has magical powers? So he's basically just a superhero if you read cherry-picked sides of the Bible. But then if you read the entire Bible, he's a supervillain.
The God who created this universe is outside of the universe. He's above it, beyond it, in it, through it. He's unaffected by it.
He said that so fast, I'm just going to slow it down for you. But basically, if God were to exist, in my opinion, I would basically say the universe itself is God. Not something intelligent, just the universe. As we see it today, as it exists, the universe, the space in which all space exists in.
It's outside of the universe. He's above it, beyond it, in it, through it. He's unaffected by it.
That statement there sounds more like my idea than the Bible's idea. Just thought I'd put that out there.
So the concept that a spiritual force cannot have any effect on a material body, well then I guess you'd have to explain to me things like emotions and love and hatred and envy and jealousy and rationality.
Emotions are pretty well understood. They're not spiritual. And even if we didn't understand them, it doesn't mean that's godly. The lack of understanding of something doesn't mean God.
I mean, if your brain is just a random collection of chemicals that formed by chance over billions of years, how on earth can you trust your own reasoning processes and the thoughts that you think?
Either way, he has a point, but the same argument can be used exactly as it is against you, so it doesn't matter. But this is why science is done by peer review and making sure, to the best of our abilities, even if not completely accurate 100% of the time, which is why science actually adapts and changes, but religions usually don't. Science changes because we know that we can be wrong sometimes, but we try our best to understand the world around us as it currently is, instead of trying to fit the universe around our current beliefs.
If God created the universe, then who created God?
A similar question, and yet again, perfectly valid. If God could have existed for an eternity without a single cause, then so could the universe have in one way or another. You cannot just simply claim one couldn't have and not the other. It works for both, or not at all.
And who created the creator of God?
Which was basically my alien question earlier, apart from the defining what God actually is, because that would be pretty hard too.
These questions are often asked as a way to challenge the concept of a divine being.
And it's a perfectly acceptable challenge, but not everything has to be some form of aggression or an attack or something against you. It's fine. You have created a statement by stating God exists, and we're saying no. This is one of our questions why.
But what if I told you that the questions themselves are based on a flawed assumption? That assumption being that everything must have a beginning and an end.
Of course you state the question is wrong, but yes, that is a flawed assumption, because the universe could have existed for eternity. Maybe it didn't, maybe something existed before it, maybe it does have a cause for the universe starting, but what was before that might still be natural, not supernatural or magical, and again so on for ages until we find the uncaused eternal state of existence that we may one day regress back to, fulfilling an eternal loop.
We assume that God must have a beginning.
Well, if it's intelligent, then I assume that it one day had a first thought. I guess it must do, really. But the universe isn't conscious or intelligent, so it might not do. It wouldn't have had to have had a first anything. I'm not saying that's true, but there's no reason to assume that it had a first cause.
Because everything we know of in this universe has a beginning.
Except for the universe itself. I mean, the Big Bang was not the start of the universe. It was the start of the universe as we know it, but not the beginning of its existence.
But what if God exists outside of time and space?
The universe contains time and space, so therefore it is outside of time and space, because time and space is within it.
What if God is the very fabric of existence itself?
What if the universe is the very fabric of time and space?
The infinite source from which everything arises.
Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, so what if this is the eternal state of the universe, and we're just going through one of its phases of its eternal state?
Asking who created God is like asking what is north of the North Pole.
Asking who created the universe is like asking what is whiter than white.
The question itself is meaningless.
Yes, the question is meaningless. I can't answer which fictional character created that fictional character that many people have wrote about in many different ways throughout time, whether it being one god or multiple gods. There have been thousands that have been written about throughout time. Just like I can't ask who the fictional character was who created the universe. There wasn't one. The question isn't who created the universe, it is how the universe came to be. Naturally.
The answer lies not in our human understanding, but in the acceptance of the mystery of existence.
Ah, I see now. Don't ask questions. Just believe what I say to be true. Let me just ask one more question about the statement, though, not necessarily God. If that statement is true, that God is beyond our understanding, how is it that you have a good understanding of this? But hey, what a surprise, there's still no proof of God, as there shouldn't be. Religion is faith-based, and with proof, you lose faith. So you shouldn't be finding proof anyway. The concept of God is fine, but denying science isn't. So that's why I do what I do, and mostly it's against biblical literalists. I recently had a nice conversation with a theist in the past video, so thank you for that. Let me know if any of these convinced you, or maybe I missed some points that I didn't mean to if I did. So let me know. But there are 2 videos on screen right now. Feel free to click on one, and I'll see you there.